What's up, kings and queens? It's Dan from Daft Previews, and we're here once again for another comprehensive preview on the 4 games on this NBA slate. I can't wait to get into it with you. Given there's only 4 games, we can spend a little bit more time diving a little bit deeper into these props. I had a losing day today. I'm not going to hide it. I'm going to wear it. I had some pretty shit picks out there, and I learned 2 things. One, let's not double dip and put 2 players on the same person. Both Brook Lopez and Kyle Kuzma absolutely did my ass in today. So whilst I put my ass back into where it was before, that was the first learning. And the second learning is if someone's a game time decision, such as Denny Ardbia, probably don't take Kyle Kuzma under rebounds and assists, knowing that if he doesn't play, Kuzma's probably going to eat. So I jumped the gun a little bit. I'll research a little bit further. I know a lot of you guys aren't here just to tell my picks. You do appreciate the research, but if I'm going to put these picks out there, I've got to be accountable for them. So I'll wear them. I had some shit picks, and it's not going to be the last time, I tell you that. Overall in the season, still up 48.9 units. So I'm not absolutely terrible. There are definitely better ones out there, but I know a lot of you guys are here for the research. So let's get into it. I'll be sharing my screen. We'll go through outlier.pet. A lot of you guys, I said pet again, outlier.bet. I know a lot of you guys have signed up through that link. A lot of you guys have also gone directly to Outlier. If you do want the 7-day free trial, you do have to click on that link in the video description below. Now let's get into it. Let's go. We're jumping into the Toronto Raptors versus the Indiana Pacers. Now, Aaron Naismith Jr., he's a game time decision in this game. Other than that, everyone appears to be playing. So we'll jump in, we'll get a deep dive, we'll go through all the key props, we'll talk about matchups, and you know the rest. So let's start off with these Toronto Raptors first. Kicking it off with RJ Barrett. Now we're looking at his points prop firstly. Now his line is set at 19.5. Firstly, I'll call out that he does have a good matchup. The Pacers do allow the 4th most points to small forwards on the season. Now RJ Barrett has covered this line in 7 of his last 10 games. And against the Indiana Pacers, the last time he versed them, he scored 23 points. So look, last 10 points to the over, his recent form points to the over, and the fact that he's got a good matchup also points to the over. Jumping into his other props, let's have a look at his assists. I know he's done a decent job of this lately. He's covered this line of 3.5 in 6 out of his last 10. Somewhat difficult matchup. The Pacers allow the 7th fewest assists to small forwards. And in his last game against the Pacers, he recorded 3 assists. So given the difficult matchup and his form against them, I'd be a bit hesitant. But look, crazy things can happen. Looking at his rebounds, his line's at 5.5. Pretty juiced at -130, but he has a good matchup. Against the Pacers, he's also covered this in 7 out of his last 10 games. And the last time he versed the Pacers, he had 9 rebounds. So, a couple ways that we could play this if we do like what we see. Obviously, points and rebounds is probably what we're liking the most. But points is -119. And rebounds are -130. We put the 5.5 plus the 19.5 together. That equals 24.5. Jesus Christ, I can't count. Let's just assume it's 24.5. If we look at his points and rebound prop, it's at 25.5. You're getting that for -120. So it pretty much balances out okay. So this hit rate is very similar to his last 10 overall. Points being the biggest contributor in this. His rebounds, the lowest rebounds he's had in the last 10 games is 5. And his lines and I think there's a good chance that he can go over his rebound prop, right? And hopefully score a couple extra ones to help us get through. Had 9 rebounds, 23 points. So you could really play it on either, to be honest. I'm not going to make any decisions right now. I'll make sure I dive a little bit further before I make my final picks. But that's an interesting one there for RJ Barrett. Points and rebounds, definitely lean to the over with those two. Let's have a look at Jakob Poeltl. He's up against Miles Turner. Points props at 11.5. The Pacers do allow the 9th fewest points to centers on the season. Now, Jakob Poeltl's hit this in 7 out of his last 10 games. And against the Pacers, he's actually covered in 2 out of his last 3. With these games were this season. One game he had 6 points. The second game he had 19 points. He played 29 minutes in both of those games. Looking in his last 10, he's averaging 27 minutes per game. So a slight reduction in his minutes played. But I don't love this bet, but I also don't hate it. So you can go either way on this one. Looking at his rebound prop, the line's at 8.5. He's hit in 7 of his last 10. 3 games straight. Difficult matchup. Pacers allowing the 7th fewest rebounds to centers. And against the Pacers, he's hit in 1 of his last 3. The last time they played, he did have 11 rebounds, Prior to that, he had gone under. So there's Jakob Poeltl for you. Let's have a look at Gary Trent Jr. He's starting at shooting guard in this one. His points props at 11.5. The matchup isn't good nor bad against the Pacers. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. And looking at head-to-head matchups, he's only covered in 1 out of his last 4 games against the Indiana Pacers. Quick look at his minutes, and it is rather inconsistent. It does go up and down. In his last 10 games, he's probably found some consistency in his last 3. So if he keeps getting those types of minutes, you can probably expect him to play about 30 minutes in this game. If we want to get sexy with it and we just move it to all games where Gary Trent has played at least 30 minutes, suddenly you see that he's hit this in 9 out of his last 10 games. So I'm not saying he is going to play 30 minutes, but this is just one way that you could use Outlier. If you get a good indication of how many minutes this person is going to play, you can muck around with the filters and you can produce something juicy just like this. The only game against the Pacers where he did play more than 30 minutes, he scored 32 points. So check out your depth chart, see who else is on the roster. But Gary Trent Jr., if he plays more than 30 minutes, he's most likely covering this line. The problem is, I can't guarantee he plays more than 30 minutes. Having a look at Bruce Brown, he's jumped in and out of the starting lineup. He's probably swapping with Gary Trent Jr., but his points prop is at 10.5. Tends to play the 2 or the 3, but he can really play anywhere, right? So he's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. The last times he's versed the Pacers, he scored 14 and 12 points. In those games, he played 34 and 26 minutes. Looking at his last 10, he is averaging 24.7 minutes per game. His last 4 games, very healthy in terms of minutes. I wonder if they had some roster changes at this point, but yeah, not a strong read on his points. He does get it done on the assists and rebounds sometimes, though. So let's have a look at that. His assist line's at 2.5. He's covered this in 7 out of his last 10. It is quite juiced. And in head-to-head matchups, he's covered this in both of his games against the Pacers. Rebound prop is at 3.5. He's only covered this in 2 out of his last 10 and 1 of his last 2 against the Pacers. So, look, Bruce Brown playing off the bench, you'd have to look in how often has he played off the bench, how many minutes is he getting when he plays off the bench, and so yada, yada, yada. So, not very aroused by that play, but having a jump into Emmanuel quickly. His points line is at 18.5. He has only covered in 4 of the last 10, but he has gone over in his last 2. The Pacers matchup's not a good one or a bad one. Looking at his points prop, he only scored 14 points the last time these teams played. He played 35 minutes, only attempted 11 shots. So let's check his assist prop. 5.5's the line. He's hit in 4 out of his last 10. The Pacers allowed the 3rd fewest assists to point guards. And in head-to-head matchups, he did have 7 assists the last time they played. And I would have made the assumption he would have went over his assists, given that he didn't shoot the ball that much. But given the fact that he's gone so far under his points prop, potentially an under in his points plus assists could be a play. 24.5. He has gone over in his last 2. Actually gone over 5 of his last 10. And he went under the last time he played the Pacers. But I'm not looking for unders, especially on this day. Small slate. Why put myself through the pain? And who else is there? Scotty Barnes. Let's check a look at Scotty. His points prop is at 20.5. He's covered in 3 out of his last 10. He's got a great matchup. The Pacers give up a ton of points to power forwards. And against the Pacers, he's covered in 2 out of his last 4. Did score 29 points the last time these teams played, which is an important one because that's the only game he's versed the Pacers against Pascal Siakam. He played 36 minutes. He took 22 shots in that game. Want to check his recent form to see if we're seeing a similar level of activity, and we're not. So after that 22 attempts against the Pacers, regress straight back down to 13 shot attempts. So unless he takes his personal and takes more than 20 shots again, I can't confidently say he goes over. Looking at his assist prop, the line is at 7.5. The Pacers allowed the 11th fewest assist. You can see here, the last time he versed the Pacers, he had 8 assists. He has covered this in 6 out of his last 10. He's actually covered this in 5 out of his last 6 games. And you can get 7.5 for plus money, plus 112. So that is not bad whatsoever. I don't mind that. I definitely lean to the over for Scotty Barnes there. Looking at his rebound prop, the line's at 7.5. He has covered in 5 of his last 10. He's covered in 5 of his last 6, actually. The Pacers, allowing the 7th most rebounds to power forwards. The last time he versed the Pacers, he had 12 boards. So what I would be feeling in this one, to be honest, is probably, because you don't know about the shot attempts, right? I can't get a read on that. But rebounds and assists is something I might fuck with. Check that out. Apologize for the language, but I don't. Not really. He's hit this in 6 consecutive games. He's gone over 14 and a half rebounds and assists. You can see the games where he hasn't rebounded well. He's made up for it on the assist front. But outside of that, he has been rebounding quite well. And if he's getting the assist too, we're looking good. So he does have a good matchup on the rebound side of things. He's going to get a lot of opportunities, a lot of hand on the ball. So Scotty Barnes over rebounds and assists, definitely something I can lean towards. Odds aren't the best, but I think given the hit rate as of late, I think it's still worth taking. But I'll decide on that a little bit later. You can check the final pin comment to see what I land on. Jumping into the end of Indiana Pacers, let's have a look at Miles Turner in this one. His points prop is at 16.5. He's got a good matchup. The Raptors allow the 8th most points to centers on the season. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10, and he's hit this in 3 out of his last 4 games against the Raptors. The game he didn't hit, he finished on 16 points, and that was a road game at Toronto. This is a home game for him, and if we just want to have a look at his home games, we can see that he's covered in 5 of his last 10. So nothing extravagant going on there. Let's have a look at his rebound prop. His line is 7.5 plus money. He's got a good matchup. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10, but 3 of his last 4. And against the Raptors, check that out. He's covered in 3 of his last 4, and the only time he went under, he finished on 7. I think that was the same game. He only finished on 16 points. So very close to covering these lines. And for plus money, not the worst play in the world, I'd say. What are we looking at? Maybe his points and his rebounds prop. I think it'll show us the same thing, though. He's hit it in 4 of his last 10, and he's hit it in 3 of his last 4 games against the Toronto Raptors. So I think for this particular matchup, the line is just about right. He does have a pretty decent matchup, but we've seen that he doesn't often hit this. He's hit this in 40% of his last 20 games. So normally you'd probably see this line at about 22.5, perhaps. Given the easier matchup, it's a little bit higher at 24.5. So I think that line is about right. But I also think if you want to take Miles Turner for maybe 15 points, 6 rebounds, probably good for your parlays, perhaps, because he has hit those quite well. Let's have a look at Andrew Nembhard, starting shooting guard, plays a little bit of point guard when Hallie's not there. But let's check it out. His points line's at 9.5. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10 games. Against the Raptors, he's covered it in both games that he's played against them this season, averaging 35 and 32 minutes. Let's check out his last 5 games. Yeah, in his last 5 games, he's playing 33 minutes a night. So pretty consistent. Only shooting the ball 7.5 times, though. So he has to rely on some pretty hot shooting percentages. He'd need to shoot at least, he'd have to make about 4 to 5 shots in order to cover this line, but I don't mind that. The matchup is decent in terms of points allowed to shooting guards. Let's check his assist prop. That's at 4.5. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10, and he covered it in both games against the Toronto Raptors. So he's actually done quite well against the Raptors. What I'd be interested in checking is whether Halliburton played in these games. So let's check games with Tyrese Halliburton. And okay. So one game where he had 10 assists is the one he didn't play against him. Play with Hallie. This game right here. So that's one game that he didn't play, that Hallie didn't play. So with Hallie, he had 5 assists, pretty much. He had 5 assists, and he had 14 points. Yeah, 14 points and 5 assists for Andrew Nembhard. If we look at his points plus assists, we can see he's covered in 4 out of his last 10, but he did get 19 the last time they played. So I don't mind that for Nembhard. That's not too bad. Have a look at Spicy P, Pascal Siakam. I think he had a pretty quiet game in his last one against Dallas. Yeah, he did too. And I only know that because a lot of people picked the over because the matchup was good. I was hesitant to take it. Thank God I didn't. That would have been another loss for me. But his points props at 21.5. He's covered this in 4 out of his last 10. The Raptors allow the 11th fewest points to power forwards on the season. Pascal did score 23 points the last time they each other. 23 points, so that's not too bad at all. In that game, got the ball 17 times, so he didn't hog it the way that Scotty Barnes did. That was actually the last time he covered this line. Prior to that, wasn't doing so well. I'm looking at his assist prop, though. That's at 3.5. It's plus money. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. He had 7 assists in that game. And looking at his rebound prop, it's 6.5. He only had 5 rebounds in that last game against the Raptors. So Rebounding, quite inconsistent, a somewhat difficult matchup. The assist one is quite intriguing, though. I wonder what was happening here. Did the Raptors say that we're not going to let Pascal Siakam score on us today? Force him to pass? I'm not too sure. Who else is there of interest? Tyrese Halliburton. We can't miss him. So we know that the Raptors, they allow the second fewest points to point guards on the season. Hallie scored 21 points the last time they played. He's covered this in 2 out of his last 10. Head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 1 of his last 4. So I would lean to the under for Hallie. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 11.5 minus 119 odds. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. He got 12 assists the last time they played. He does have a good matchup, but yeah, I don't know. Those odds for him to get 12 assists, I'm not too confident in that. I think he can definitely do it, but I'd hate to, I got burnt by Trae Young taking him for 12 assists. It's just a very high number. It's like betting someone to score 30 points. Like it definitely could happen, but he's hit this line, for example, 11.5 in 52% of the games this year. So it really is a pick 'em. He does have a good matchup, but yeah, I'm not too sure. I think the lines have really sharpened around Tyrese Halliburton. Let's have a look at Benedict Matherin's points. His props at 15.5. It's got a decent matchup, but he's only hit this twice out of his last 10. And against the Raptors, he's gone under in his last 2, covering only 1 of his last 4. So having a quick reflection back on this game, Barrett points and rebounds. I've got a bit of confidence there. I think Miles Turner, his points and rebounds, if we lower those a little bit, could be a good option for looking at some parlays. Who else is there? Pascal Siakam, I'm not overly confident. Scotty Barnes, rebounds and assists. That's another one that I can really look at. But yeah, I'll make a final decision on those later. Jumping into the Detroit Pistons versus the New York Knicks. In terms of matchups and lineups, Isaiah Stewart is out for this one, still suspended. OG, Randall, Mitch Robinson still out for the New York Knicks. So let's jump into these Knicks players firstly, starting with Jalen Brunson. His points prop is at 30.5. He just got off a massive game, 34 points against the Boston Celtics in a 14-point loss. He's covered this line in 6 out of his last 10. Has an excellent matchup. The Pistons can't defend point guards to save their lives. Head-to-head matchups, he did score 42 points the last time these teams met, which is massive. 42 points, and the Knicks won by 6. So definitely leaning to the over for Jalen Brunson. But again, you're looking for someone to score more than 30 points. Could be a tough bet. Looking at his assist prop, it's at 7.5. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10 games. Has a good matchup. And against the Pistons, he had 8 assists that last matchup. So 42 points and 8 assists. Crazy. 42 points and 8 assists from Jalen Brunson against the Detroit Pistons. I think if you're looking at his points and assist prop, you're looking at 38.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games. Hasn't hit that very well this season, but over the last 10, he's been pretty decent. I probably have to research this a little bit better. Personally, where my mind goes is I'd be thinking about what happened in this game against Detroit. Did Julius Randle play? Were they missing other players? Was this just before or after the trade where they had limited depth? And did he play more minutes? He played almost 40 minutes, but he plays for the right. That's what Tibbs does to teams. So Jalen Brunson's numbers and matchup looks good, but you'd want to look at the scenarios surrounding that first matchup or last matchup. Let's have a look at Dante DiVincenzo. Right, his points prop is at 17.5. He's covered this in 7 of his last 10 games. Doesn't have the easiest matchup. The Pistons allowing the 12th fewest points to shooting guards. He was killing this after the trade deadline, taking a lot more shots, but he's really started to simmer down. His minutes coming down slightly, but his field goal attempts are starting to come back down to earth as well. So this guy was chucking up 20-plus shots in every single game once upon a time. He ain't doing that anymore. He ain't about that life. Head-to-head matchups, he only scored 12 points the last time these teams played, but he only shot the ball 8 times and played 22 minutes. So I don't think that's an accurate reflection of what DiVincenzo can do against the Pistons. I think the line is honestly just about right, 17.5. So when I say the line is right, it means I'm too afraid to take a bet. That's what that tells me. But let's jump into his other props real quick. Assists, lines at 3.5, 6 out of his last 10, 2 assists the last time they played. He's got a terrible matchup. Looking at rebounds, lines at 3.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 and had 3 rebounds the last time they played, and that's a difficult matchup as well. Having a look at Bojan Bogdanovic. So it looks like he'll be coming off the bench in this one. He'll still get lots of opportunities, but his line's at 14.5. When he played the Boston Celtics, this is an FYI, his line was at 15.5. So 14.5 in this one. He's hit in 7 of his last 10, but he's played 4 games for the New York Knicks. So he's covered this in 2 out of his last 4. And in head-to-head matchups, this is up against his old team. So this is the first time he's playing his old team. Now, does that mean something? I know there's a lot of bettors out there who wait for a player to play against their old team and really start to turn it up. I don't know if that's the case here for Bojan Bogdanovic. You can see here, he played 33 minutes in his first game, but since then, he's down to about 20 minutes as an average. And in those 20 minutes, 13, and 7 shot attempts. So he's not taking enough shot attempts to score points. You'd probably like to see 10 to 12 shot attempts on average. But yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant, and I don't really buy into that whole revenge going back to your old team bullshit. Some players do it and some players don't. It's not an absolute lock that they go off against their old team. Let's have a look at Precious Achiuwa. He's been quietly pretty good if you're looking at his rebounds. So his points prop is at 12.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. Looking at his rebound prop, the lines are now set at 9.5, which is quite high. He's been doing quite well lately. He has covered in 5 out of his last 10. All these last 10 games, he was on the Knicks the whole time. But looking at his minutes, he's playing 40 minutes a night. So the Tibbs effects is real. So he's getting plenty of opportunity. The matchup isn't the best one, though. It's not good nor bad. So I think the line is just about right. Once upon a time, his lines were lower than Josh Hart's lines for rebounds. That's not happening anymore. So I won't be taking any bets on Precious Achiuwa. Let's check out Josh Hart. I'm just going to have a guess here because I haven't looked at it. His rebound line is at 8.5. It might be at 9.5. It might be at 9.5. If it's at 8.5, I might take it. Just saying. But points prop, line set at 11.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. He's got a great matchup. The Pistons allow a lot of points to small forwards. Head-to-head matchups, he only scored 7 points in that last game. He played 32 minutes and only attempted 3 shots. So he's taking a lot more shots these days. Check this out. He's averaging 10.9 field goal attempts in his last 10 games. So he's taking 10 and he's making about 40% of those shots, and one of those is a three-pointer. So he's probably 8, 9 plus free throws. I think the line's just about right, to be honest. But let's check out his rebound prop. Is it 8.5 or 9.5? I want you to think about it to yourselves. It's 8.5 minus 119. That's not too bad. All right. Maybe I could get with this. So he's hit this in 8 of his last 10 games. The matchup for rebounds isn't an easy one, but it's not a hard one by no stretch of the imagination. 8 of his last 10, he had 7 rebounds the last time he played the Pistons. He played 32 minutes. These days, how much is he playing? He's playing 39.2 minutes per game in his last 10. So, yeah, I think I would consider taking the over for Josh Hart here, but I'll most likely end up playing him maybe just for 8 rebounds and probably have a same game parlay on this game because I don't like the 119 here. I don't want to mess around with that. Let's check out his assist prop. The line's at 4.5. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. Has a good matchup, but only had 2 assists the last time he played the Detroit Pistons. So those are your New York Knickerbockers. We then jump into the Detroit Pistons. Let's start with Cade Cunningham first. His points prop, it never moves. It's always at 21.5. Whether he scores 12 points or if he scores 30, the line stays at 21.5. So he's got a difficult matchup. The Knicks allow the third fewest points to point guards on the season. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. And the last time he versed the Knicks, he scored 31 points. So that's not too bad. Looking at his assist prop, that's at 7.5. So that has moved up slightly, but you're getting it for plus money. So it normally sits at 6.5. And the matchup, the Knicks allow the 13th most assists on the season, but this number is climbing, which means lately they've been allowing a lot more assists than usual. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10, had 8 assists the last time he versed the New York Knicks. And then rebound-wise, line's at 3.5. He's actually hit this quite well recently. He's hit in 5 straight games. It's a difficult matchup for rebounds. And he had 2 rebounds the last time he versed the New York Knicks. So I'm not feeling that for Cade Cunningham. Who else are we going to look at? Let's have a look at Jaden Ivey. So Jaden Ivey got a lot of assists the last time he played. Points line's at 14.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. The Knicks allow the 5th fewest points to shooting guards. He scored 5 points the last time he played the Knicks, but he only played 12 minutes. The game prior to that, he scored 21 points in 37 minutes. So in his last 5 games, he's averaging 29 minutes per game. So that's not very compelling. His assist line is at 3.5. The matchup isn't a good one or a bad one. He's covered in 5 of his last 10, and he's covered his assist prop in 3 of his last 4 against the Knicks. Let's have a look at Simone Fontecchio. I swear, this Fontecchio-Asar Thompson duo is pissing me off. When I bet on Fontecchio to get rebounds, he gets none, and Asar Thompson picks up 10. When I bet on Asar Thompson to score 10 points, he gets into foul trouble, finishes on 8, and Simone Fontecchio scores 17 points, and his line would have been at like 11.5 or something. So these two together are starting to piss me off. But let's have a look. Simone Fontecchio, his line's at 12.5. He's covered this in 3 straight games. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10. He's actually got a pretty decent matchup. The Knicks allowing quite a few points to small forwards on the season. Fontecchio yet to verse the New York Knicks this season or as a Piston. So let's quickly have a look at what's been happening as of late. He's playing a decent number of minutes. Shot attempts in his last 3 are pretty good. He's shooting the ball 10 plus times. We like that. He's making quite a few 3-pointers. So that's not too bad. 12.5, minus 115. I'd probably lean to the over on that. But yeah, like I said, this guy's pissing me off. Quick look at his rebounds. Line's at 3.5, plus money. Prior to this, I think I took it in one of these games, his rebound line, because he was doing this at such a consistent rate. And now he's not rebounding at all. So I will not be taking Fontecchio rebounds. Let's look at Asar Thompson. His points prop is at 9.5, and you can get that for plus money. I took a very similar play, and he scored 8 points against the Orlando Magic. Looking at the matchup, it's not a bad one. Looking at how he's played against the Knicks, he scored 3 points the last time they played, but he only played 13 minutes. In his last 5 games, he's averaging 28.2 minutes per game. He only played 20 minutes against the Orlando Magic because he got himself into some foul trouble. In this particular matchup against the Knicks, I don't see the same type of foul trouble. Obviously, he had to defend Banchero, Franz Wagner, aggressive, getting to the basket, Precious Achiuwa, Josh Hart. I don't think they command the same level of attention. So I think he'll play more minutes, and I don't mind this 9.5. Just saying, I don't mind it all. He shoots a pretty high percentage. Like, he only shot that's his fouls. He only shot the ball 4 times against the Magic, and he made every single shot. That's all I'm going to say. So I don't mind that for Asar Thompson. Let's have a quick look at his rebounds. That line's at 5.5. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10 games. The Knicks do allow the fewest rebounds to power forwards on the season. And Asar Thompson had 7 rebounds in only 13 minutes the last time he played the Knicks. So I wouldn't count him out because it's a difficult matchup. That's one thing I'm going to say. So one thing I can say is if I do like his points and his rebounds, do we just go for points and rebounds, 15.5? Is that what we're doing here? He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. He obviously didn't hit it against the Knicks last time. Rebounds are a difficult matchup, but he's shown that he can make it happen. We know Fontecchio is not going to get him. I'm not too sure. I'm a bit on the fence on this one. Let me think about it. All right, the last player to look through is Jalen Duren. His points props at 13.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. He's got a difficult matchup against the Knicks. He's actually struggled to hit this line against the Knicks. He's gone under in 4 consecutive games. Looking at his rebound prop, that's at 10.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. Difficult matchup against the Knicks, though. And Jalen Duren's hit this in 1 out of his last 4 games against the Knicks. So there's your Jalen Duren numbers. Those don't excite me. Just reflecting back on this game, what am I thinking? I think Jalen Brunson, if you lower his points and his assist props, fairly safe because he's going to get a high usage rate. That's one thought. What else is there? Josh Hart rebounds. Obviously, I like that. Precious Achiuwa, his rebounds have been good, but that line is quite high at the moment. Maybe if you take both Hart and Achiuwa, because Hartenstein hasn't been rebounding quite well, and I also don't think he's been playing enough minutes. So, and then for the Pistons, obviously Asar Thompson, I just went through his. I don't mind that. Cade Cunningham, I think his line's pretty much spot on. There's too much risk in him dropping the ball. So, yeah, those would probably be the ones I like the most so far after reviewing these. Let's jump into the Brooklyn Nets versus the Memphis Grizzlies. Ben Simmons is a game time decision in this one. And obviously, the Memphis Grizzlies have a lot of players out, but they're the same ones who have been missing games anyway. So, first player that we look for if Memphis is playing is Vince Williams Jr. This guy's been banging harder than I'm not going to finish that sentence off, but my man's been banging quite well. Firstly, his points props at 11.5 has been trending down though. He's covered this in 9 out of his last 10 games. In terms of the matchup, the Nets do allow the second most points to small forwards on the season. Head-to-head matchups, he scored 2 points the last time they played, but that was in 2022. Vince Williams, starting role now, playing a lot more minutes, 35 minutes a night. He's taken 10.5 field goals attempt per game, so he's actually not shooting the ball that much at all, to be honest. But yeah, I don't mind the over in this one, given the matchup. But assists is where we've been making our money off him. As you can see here, he's hit it in 6 consecutive games, but his line back here was at about 3.5, and it slowly made its way upwards. His line against the Clippers, his line was 5.5, and we got that for plus money. The matchup is a great one for his assist, but now we see it at 6.5, and it's not at plus money either, so I'd be a little bit hesitant. But the pick that I have been playing time and time again for Vince is points plus assists. So it's at 18.5. He's hit this in 9 out of his last 10. The last time against the Clippers, his line was 17.5. So he got done on the hook, but he does have a good matchup. You can see points allowed and assists allowed. Both are in the green. So naturally, I would lean to the over. I don't love these odds, I'm going to be honest with you, but Vince Williams has cashed in for us so many times. I'd be a little bit hesitant to not take the bet, given he has a good matchup in this one. So that's Vince Williams for you. Jaren Jackson Jr. He's playing center these days. His points props at 24.5. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10 games. He's got a difficult matchup. The Nets allow the 5th fewest points to centers on the season. 24.5, I don't mind that, to be honest. I know we can get it done, but it is a difficult matchup. Nick Claxton's a very versatile defender. But let's take a look at this man's rebounds. Line's at 4.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. He's got a difficult matchup. I don't think ever in my whole lifetime of betting on the NBA, I've ever bet on Jaren Jackson Jr. rebounds, and I'm not going to start today. Let's have a look at his blocks, though. Line's at 1.5, but he's only hit this in 3 out of his last 10. How do you go from Defensive Player of the Year to not getting many blocks? Interesting. So let's have a look at Luke Kennard. So his points line is at 11.5. And he's covered this in 7 of his last 10 games. Now, Luke Kennard, I don't know. He's not a point guard, but he's kind of playing point guard. But he doesn't get many assists as a point guard. So it's pretty whack at the moment. So, yeah, I wouldn't be making any bets on Luke Kennard. I'm just saying, because you don't exactly know his role in the offense. He's playing, 25 minutes a night. He's taking less than 10 shots. You'd think he's their best shooter by far, and he's barely shooting. So, Luke Kennard, I'm not feeling ya. Santi Aldama, sometimes this guy can go off. Let's have a look. His points props at 9.5. He's gone under in 4 straight. I think that tells us we're not going to take it. Rebounds, he's hitting 4 of his last 10. And assists, his line's at 2.5. Juice to the gills, 6 out of his last 10. So I'm regretting clicking on his name altogether. So that's it for the Memphis Grizzlies. Let's have a look at some of these Brooklyn Nets. Starting with Michael Bridges. I don't bet on him, but a lot of people do. So let's go through Michael Bridges here. Line's at 20.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games. Hasn't versed the Memphis Grizzlies for quite some time. 6 out of his last 10. Assist-wise, 3.5. Difficult matchup. He's hit in 6 of his last 10, though. Did have 8 assists against the Timberwolves. And then looking at his rebounds, 4.5, and he's covered this in 3 out of his last 10. Does have a good matchup, but he normally goes under, right? So, yeah. Just looking at those numbers is another reminder why I don't bet on this guy. He goes hot and cold all day long. Let's check out Nick Claxton. His points prop is at 11.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. Up against Jaren Jackson Jr., the Grizzlies not a good or a bad matchup. But what I will say is, once upon a time, and this was before Jaren Jackson Jr. moved to the center spot, the Grizzlies were like the 2nd or 3rd worst team at defending centers. Now that Jaren Jackson Jr. has been at the center spot for a couple of weeks, that's dropped down to 18th for the season. So, which means as of late, the Grizzlies have been defending centers quite well. So he's covered this in 5 of his last 10. He did score 16 points the last time against Memphis, but that was in 2022. Checking out his rebound line, he's only hit this in 1 out of his last 10 games. Jesus, 11.5. Look, the line's been moved up because he's a great matchup. The Grizzlies give up a lot of rebounds to centers, and Nick Claxton only had 7 rebounds the last time he played the Grizz. So I'm not feeling that. Last player in this one is Cam Thomas. Let's have a look right here. Points line's at 19.5. Hasn't had a big game for quite some time since the start of the month. Covered in 4 of his last 10. The matchup with the Grizzlies is a difficult one, who allow the 3rd fewest points to shooting guards. And he scored 0 points the last time he played the Grizzlies, but he only played 4 minutes. So can't put too much stock into that. But yeah, I'm not really feeling this game too much. The Brooklyn Nets, their offense is inconsistent. You don't know where it's going to come from. The Memphis Grizzlies, you know where it's going to come from, but Jaren Jackson Jr.'s line's quite high. Obviously, Vince Williams, probably my favorite pick in this game, just given the consistency that he's delivered on. I just remembered I forgot to check his board, so let's check that out real quick. Line's at 6.5, 4 out of his last 10. Goes up and down. He does have a good matchup. The Nets allow the most rebounds to small forwards on the season, but I don't know. He's been quite inconsistent in that regard. If you look at his PRA, he's only covered his PRA in 5 of his last 10. But if you look at his points and assists, he's covered in 9 of his last 10. So that's a bet that I've been taking time and time again. We're starting to see a bit more consistency in it, but the lines are really starting to adjust. So his points line's coming down, his assist line is going up. I think if you take them both together, I don't mind this 18.5. That Clippers matchup that he had, he did have a difficult matchup, I would say, and he struggled to score. Brooklyn Nets team obviously aren't going to offer the same level of resistance. So that'll probably be the one I like the most, but I'll double check everything before I pin my comments up. We'll jump into the last game. It's Miami Heat versus Sacramento Kings. Now, a few Heat players, game time decisions in this one, so we probably won't be able to review a lot of the Heat players, but Tyler Hero, Orlando Robertson, Terry Rozier, they're all game time decisions in this one. Thomas Bryant, Jimmy Butler, Jovic, and Richardson still out for Miami. So Miami somewhat depleted. The Sacramento Kings are on a back-to-back, but let's check it out. We'll start with Tyler Hero, just in case he does play. His line's at 20.5. He's covered in 3 out of his last 10. He's covered in 1 of his last 3 against the Kings. Assist-wise, the line's at 4.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. Had 8 assists the last time he versed the Kings. Had 0 assists the 2 games prior. And rebound-wise, line's at 5.5. He's covered it in his last 2 games against the Kings and covered in 5 out of his last 10. So in a game like this, the Miami Heat, I think there are some really good props to be had. But what you need to have is all player props available, and you also need to know who's going to be in and who's going to be out. If you have signed up to Outlier, obviously you'd have to use the filters, and you can remove Hero, Robinson, Rozier, whoever is out from the equation to see how they perform. But right now, I wouldn't take any bets on Miami Heat players purely because all of the out, it probably works in your favor. But if some of them are in, it might work against you. So I'd be quite hesitant to bet on any of the Heat players, but let's have a look at Bam. His points props at 21.5. He's covered in 3 out of his last 10. The matchup with the Kings is a difficult one, and in head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in his last 2 games against the Kings. Looking at his rebound prop, the line's at 10.5. He's covered this 7 out of his last 10. He's got a good matchup against the Kings, and he's covered this in his last 2 games against them. So, look, Bam Adebayo, 10.5. Plus 100 odds. He's hit it at a 70% rate in his last 10 games, and he's hit it in both of the last 2 games against the Kings. I think it'd be tight, but yeah, I could probably lean to the over for Bam on this one. But looking at the Sacramento Kings, I think another thing you have to factor in, right? Adebayo's rebound prop is probably not going to be affected by any of the players that do or don't decide to play for the Miami Heat. But if they all decide not to play and the Heat are somewhat depleted and the Kings blow them out, it's going to be difficult for Bam to get those rebounds anyway. So I'll wait until their lineups are confirmed. Let's jump into the Kings players. De'Aaron Fox. Now, De'Aaron Fox has his mojo back. So check that out. His line's at 23.5, but he's been murdering it in his last 4 games. Absolutely killing it. The Suns, Nuggets, Spurs, Clippers, absolutely roasting them. Matchup is a difficult one. But in head-to-head matchups, he struggled. 17 and 13 points in his last 2 games against the Miami Heat. Over this last 4-game stretch, he's playing a similar number of minutes he usually does. He's shooting the ball a lot more, but he's also shooting a very high percentage. So I think on recent form alone, I'd have to lean to the over in this one. The head-to-head matchups, yeah, it probably does mean something, but a player like De'Aaron Fox in form, that's tough to beat. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 5.5. It's plus money, plus 120. He has covered this in 6 of his last 7 games. He's covered it in 4 consecutive games now. And in head-to-head matchups, he has struggled against Miami in the past, but very similar to his points prop. He is singing right now. Looking at his points and assists, 28.5. Check that out. 46, 38, 37, and 40 in his last 4 games. He can cover this with his points alone based on how he's currently playing. So that might be interested in, but obviously I need to figure out why does he struggle against Miami. So, but I don't mind that points and assists for De'Aaron Fox. Harrison Barnes, Kevin Huerter, ain't nobody betting on these dudes. So let's jump into Domantas Sabonis. His points prop is at 20.5. Up against Bam Adebayo, he's got a difficult matchup. The Heat allowing the 3rd fewest points to centers on the season. Now, Sabonis has hit in 5 out of his last 10. Speaking of Sabonis, we did say, is he going to go over or under his PRA in his last game? And a couple of you guys commented. And the reason why I asked is because he's gone under in every single game against the Clippers, but his recent form had been crazy. I think the line in this one was 39.5 or something. And he went over it once again, despite struggling against the Clippers in the past. So I just wanted to bring that up. So somebody who picked the over, you were right. I didn't know which one to pick, so I asked you guys, and I'm glad I didn't bet it because I think I might have been leaning the under. But in terms of his points, 5 out of his last 10, 1 of his last 3 against the Miami Heat, so I wouldn't take his points prop with any confidence. His assist prop, though, 7 out of his last 10. The line's at 9.5, and you get that for plus money. The Heat allow the fewest assists to centers on the season, and Sabonis had 13 assists the last time they played. So Sabonis said, shove that matchup up your ass because I'm still getting a triple-double. Looking at his rebounds, 14.5. Is that a goddamn typo? That is so high. Like Snoop Dogg type of high. 14.5. Now, the matchup's not a bad one, though. He's covered this in 4 out of his last 10, and he has 17 rebounds against the Heat last time. I just think at some point this stuff's going to get ridiculous. 14.5. Bloody Wilt Chamberlain out here. Look, it's high enough for me not to take it, so it's probably right on, to be honest. Yeah, I'm not getting a strong read from Sabonis. Very similar to betting on Luka Doncic, right? Amazing players, similar to Jokic. They put up great stats, but yeah, the matchup is just not the matchup. The lines are just so high. So now, despite what the numbers tell you, I think Bam Adebayo is quite a good defender, to be honest. So I don't want to see Domantas Sabonis have his way. Well, in my mind, I can't seem to comprehend that. So this particular game, De'Aaron Fox, probably my favorite play that I like on this, purely because his recent form, but I need to do a little bit more research before I do make any final picks. I just realized that my camera cut out. Damn this screen sharing. So I apologize. I don't know how long that was going without you hearing my voice, seeing my damn face, but camera cut out, but I fixed it before I could finish this video, and I am not going to go back and re-record all that. But look, you're here for the research and analysis. I've taken you all through it. Best of luck with whatever you decide to bet on. My final bets will be in the pinned comments as always. Notice a few people pulling out saying, oh, sports betting is probably not for me. It's too difficult. And what I'd encourage you guys to do is make sure you're following a strict bankroll management strategy. If you're not sure of what that is, let me know in the comments section, and I might do another video on that. Sports betting is supposed to be fun. A lot of people do it just to make some profit. And if you're serious about making profit, one, you need to have a strategy in place in terms of how you place your bets, how much you place on them, also how you make your selections. I wouldn't be following bets that I'm making. If you're serious about making profit, I'd really encourage you to learn to do it yourself. Use something like Outlier. If you want to use the Outlier, there's a 7-day free trial, but there are other tools out there. I would encourage you to do your own research first. Watch heaps of videos about that respectable cappers are putting out there on some education around sports betting, and then make the right decisions. All right. So let me know in the comment section what you decide to ride with. I'll catch you guys at a very similar time tomorrow. Best of luck. Gamble responsibly, but not really. It's up to you. Peace.
Picks and the juice and the daily. It's all free. You don't even have to pay me.